South West Coast.
Thank you, Acting Speaker, and I rise to speak on the Health Services Bill Information Sharing Bill 2021. And it's a bill that, whilst we don't oppose this, I will take some time to raise some of the concerns I have. In saying that, clearly, as a nurse who experienced people coming into accident emergency and wanting to access their medical details quickly so you could treat people, I'm not opposed to the concept at all. And but I would have thought the motion put forward this morning by the member for Lowan to send this to the Legal and Social Committee, given that it's such an important bill to get right and we don't want breaches occurring, and given that it isn't going to be implemented till 2023, I'm very disappointed that the government have chosen to rush this bill through in a 6-day time frame and not given it the due diligence that it needs so we can consult with our communities. Clearly, as I said, we do want to see information sharing across hospitals and different health platforms in a safe and secure way. There would be nothing better than someone coming in and they're bleeding and you want to know what their cross-match results are pretty urgently so you can get some blood straight up. So understand the importance of this concept, but what worries me is that, like I said, the bill was introduced into the Parliament with a 6-day time frame, which is very short and not usual. And at the bill briefing, which the department were very, very good to be able to do at such short notice, and they even noted that it was a very short time frame, so were unable to give us information that was imperative for us to be able to do our role here and scrutinise legislation. So it was most concerning that to hear that the program has no budget that they could talk to us about because there isn't one available, that no business case had been undertaken, and that there were issues such as what the implications would be for border communities, for example, like my area of South West Coast, where people use ambulance to go from one side to the other when they've had an accident on the border, for example, and the hospital's on the other side of the arbitrary line that runs around my part of the world between South Australia and South West Coast, that they hadn't actually thought through how that would work. Now, that doesn't surprise me because, it's a very common statement in my part of the world that this current government only governs for Melbourne. So the fact that they hadn't thought about the far-reaching areas of Victoria and the state borders doesn't actually surprise me. But when you see that other states, such as New South Wales and Queensland, have already implemented this platform sharing process, it's really hard to understand why the government can't answer those questions, specifically when other jurisdictions have done that homework and would be able to be used as a resource to work out what they needed to iron out in Victoria to get it right. But why this is so worrying and why I'm so concerned about this is because this is not a new concept. Now, let's just remember, this government has pretty much been in for the last 2 decades. Now, technology advancements have been extraordinary and in that last 20 years, and they've been in government for 17 or 18 of the last 21 years. Now, in 2003, this is why I'm most concerned that we couldn't get a budget, there was no business case, and the information that I would have thought this government would have had access to shocks me so much. And that's because in 2003, under the Bracks government, they launched a program called HealthSmart, which was to do exactly this, to actually have access across health platforms and health organisations. And that price tag at the time they put on it was a budget of $323 million. Now, in 2000, and that project was due to be completed in 2007, all in the time the government was in charge. So in 2010, it was reported that another $37 million had already been pumped into the project and the due date was being extended for that project to be delivered. In 2011, the Victorian Ombudsman reported that the project would cost a further $243 million to complete. So clearly, they had spent from 2003 to 2010 and had not delivered the project, had blown the project out by nearly the same amount as they'd already injected in it, and had not delivered anything. And that's what worries me, that this government has that experience and still doesn't have any understanding. There's no learnings from that. There's no information that they've taken from that. And in 2 decades, they haven't done that job that clearly needed to be done. And they haven't got the preparation necessary to be able to give confidence that they're ready to do it. Now, we're in the middle of a pandemic. So wouldn't you have thought a government who was the least resource, they had the least resource health department of any of the jurisdictions, any of the states of Australia, wouldn't you have thought that they knew this was a job to be done and at the start of the pandemic would have been concerned? But here we are, nearly 2 years into the pandemic, and they rushed this bill through with no detail and no understanding of how they're going to run the program. Now, the reason I'm also very concerned is this government has a very poor history, not only of the Health Smart information systems, which is, nearly 2 decades ago that they started, but even in the last 2 years. When you look at the multiple breaches of data and information that have happened under this government's watch, in 2016 there were multiple breaches of personal data for children in foster care. Now that's extraordinarily worrying. This was a situation where a person was able to use information that should have been under the government's program of security, protecting children, and children were actually being groomed under that breach, from that breach. In 2017, there was after the review into the childcare protection breaches, further breaches were then identified. There's been 15 million individual data breaches by Myki to a third party between 2015 and 2018. And even 2019-2020 OVIC report shows data breach notifications received over time, that time of 2019-2020 has increased year on year since the Andrews government came into power, including 16% increase in that year of 2019-2020 alone. So this is a government who now wants to quickly throw something together that's as important as people's health data. So clearly I'm worried. I'm very worried due to that shocking history this government has. And now when I think about the promises they make, and it's all about looking good rather than actually delivering an outcome, you think about the 4,000 ICU beds that we were promised as a community, that gave us the reassurance we were preparing and getting ready for people needing to have respiratory support during a pandemic of a respiratory nature. And here we are 18 months later, and we find out that that was actually not true, that there wasn't going to be 4,000, there are not 4,000 beds delivered, and the 1.3 billion that was promised in that, we don't know where that's gone. So here is a government who's spent a lot of time showing or telling us they're helping, telling us they're looking after us. But when you dig deep, and I keep saying this in this parliament, if you scratch the surface, you can see very much smoke and mirrors, not much substance. So even the cyber security aspect of this, the government, said they had it sorted. It was pointed out by the Auditor General, I couldn't find the word. It's pointed out by the Auditor General that there was obviously able to be breaches in the IT system in the health service. He actually hacked it himself to prove how simple it would be. The government ignored that, and sure enough, we had a hack situation where it put South West Healthcare and the southwest of health hospitals out of action for many months. It was absolutely catastrophic. So I'm very concerned about this government taking on board a centralised system, particularly in the middle of a pandemic when they're already not coping and trying to implement and deliver this. We've got systems now that clearly aren't working. The contact tracing system, which is centralised in my part of the world right now, people are literally inundating the office this week saying, I've been to a tier 1 site, I've found out from a friend, it's not up on the website, no one's contacted me, I've done the right thing, but how come no one's actually ringing me or giving me the information? And literally all week that's been happening. Now, our community are doing a great job managing the pandemic outbreak that's going on in South West Coast at the moment, in both Portland and Warrnambool, Portland in the last couple of days. And I have every faith in the community and congratulate both South West Healthcare, Terang Mortlake Healthcare, Portland District Health for the work they do, and the community members who are isolating. I had a young woman ring me on the weekend. Her daughter had been highlighted as a Tier 1 site. She was at school. The school were trying to figure out why. This child had not been to a Tier 1 site. That family isolated for days on end because DHHS could not give them any information, and it's not good enough. A centralised system needs to be effective, and this government's history of that is simply poor, and I'm very worried about their ability.